took our phones at the door and gave us paper notebooks, the kind with cardboard covers and spines that crack when you open them. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee, and the windows were painted shut. I remember that because I always noticed exits, and these were ornamental. A woman with a silver watch and calm eyes set a timer in the middle of the table. We had one rule: tell the truth and trust that we all will too. It sounded simple, the way a magic trick sounds simple when you haven't seen the second hand. There were 8 of us. We were strangers and also not. Algorithmic neighbors pulled by an ad that said, "Monetize your honesty," a social study with real payouts. I came because my rent had climbed $100 and my job at the museum gift shop added hours without adding money. I told myself it would make a good story, which is how I excused most things. The facilitator, Dr. Arden, explained the format. Over 6 sessions, we'd share a secret, pass a test of trust, and vote on how much of the pooled money each person deserved. "The pot grows when you resist the urge to keep things private," she said, voice steady like a good audiobook. "Truth is an economy." The timer blinked 60:00. Somewhere behind a one-way mirror, a camera hummed. When the first person, an IT guy named Jamie, confessed to reading his roommate's emails, I felt a small relief leave my chest. The secrets weren't mortal. They were the petty betrayals we practice on each other like scales. When a woman with an immaculate blowout named Brooke admitted she still checked her ex's location, we all laughed, softly, the way you laugh at a story you've been starring in without rehearsal. Then, on the 3rd session, someone leaked. A screenshot of Jamie's confession appeared on a neighborhood forum with a caption, "These are the people living next to you." His name blurred, but the handle wasn't. He stopped coming. The pot shrank. Dr. Arden said, "This is a test of our commitment," and turned the timer as if time could be reset just by asking. I should have quit. Instead, I kept showing up with my notebook and my damp palms and the taste of copper when it was my turn to talk. Because here's the part I didn't tell anyone. The secret I carried wasn't petty. It was a key to a door I'd shut so hard it warped in the frame. The ad had promised science. What we got was a lesson in leverage. What do you call a study that can ruin your life if the wrong person names you? My name is Rowan. I am 29 years old, 5'8" when I stand like I mean it, and I used to believe that stories save us. That's why I work the front desk at the Chicago Museum of Letters. Gift shop, tours, the odd talk about vintage typewriters. In my head, I'm always writing things down, even when my hand is empty. It's a habit I got from my dad, who filled little black notebooks with lists only he could read. Numbers and arrows, names and dates that didn't add up until the day the FBI came for him. He called it a lending club. The paper called it wire fraud. I don't practice the word out loud, but it still fits in my mouth. I was 19 when he went away, an age when you think you're a building with permanent walls. The day he was sentenced, the courtroom was cold enough to turn your thoughts into glass. My mother wore a blouse she'd bought for graduations that didn't happen. I stopped trusting forms after that. Applications, contracts, any arrangement that needed my signature. 10 years later, I rent a studio in Pilsen above a bakery that wakes me at 4 a.m. with the smell of yeast and sugar. On mornings I open, I carry the scent with me like a scarf. On nights I close, I take home the dust of paper bags and the faint tang of ink from souvenir postcards. I've dated men who love the idea of a girl who says palimpsest and casual sentences. None of them like the part where I check the locks twice.
My mother and I talk on Sundays about everything except money and my father. If I say lending, she changes the subject to the weather, which in Chicago is a personality, not a topic. When I saw the ad, share a secret, help science, earn up to $5,000, I told myself it was a social experiment, like the ones in college psych classes, where everyone learns something about trust and no one gets hurt. I told myself the payout could mean 2 months of breathing. The application asked for demographic info and a paragraph about why I'd be a good subject. I wrote, I want to understand why we tell the truth to strangers before we tell it to people who love us. I didn't mention my father. They chose 8 of us: me, Jamie, IT, Brooke, content strategist, Omar, med school dropout turned rideshare driver, Min, grad student in statistics, Ava, teacher who kept correcting her own grammar mid-sentence, Theo, barber with an Instagram following, and Heather, nurse wearing scrubs with cart zone owls. That first night, the air in the conference room felt recirculated, like a plane that hasn't landed in days. We signed NDAs that rhymed with the ones my father had ignored. The table was oval, the chairs rolled, the mirror watched. Dr. Arden had the kind of calm that makes you want to confess just to see if she can still keep it. She wore black shirts and a silver watch and the expression of a person measuring weather. She said, "We're studying relational risk, how people weigh truth against reward." Every session had 2 parts: confession, then trust exercise. For confession, you wrote a secret and read it out loud. For trust, we did something that nudged our boundaries. Hand your wallet to the person on your left. Allow someone to pick a random photo from your camera roll and display it for 10 seconds. Read a line from a text thread with your mother. Each time we complied, the pot grew. Each time someone hesitated, it shrank. We started with $1,000. By the end of session 2, we had $3,600 and a solidarity that tasted like sugar water. Then Jamie leaked. That's how we said it, because saying someone betrayed us made the room smaller. The leak started stupid: a screenshot of a whiteboard with ethics spelled ethics and a caption about fake scientists. But in the corner, Jamie's username from the forum where he posted about gaming chairs appeared like a name tag. The next day, a post appeared with a transcript of his confession. He insisted he didn't do it. He ghosted anyway. Arden told us fear will be part of the data, like she was naming a cloud formation. We nodded like students who wanted A's. I kept coming because I wanted to believe that secrets can be shared without being sold, and because the rent was real, and because the truth I was carrying had started to press on my ribs like a hand. I had moved back to Chicago from Madison after my father's sentencing because the city felt like a story I wasn't finished telling. I took the job at the museum because I love objects that outlive their owners. I said yes to the study because trust sounded like a muscle I could get back if I lifted slowly and didn't look down. The notebooks they gave us had perforated pages. That should have been my first hint. Truth meant to be torn out. But I liked the way the pen they provided wrote, smooth and slow like water on glass. I wrote small, neat letters and watched strangers do the same. It felt important, the way small rituals feel important in a world that doesn't send you instructions. The night before session 3, I stood by my window and watched a snowplow throw wet snow into glittery heaps. I rehearsed what I would say when it was my turn. I was going to tell the group the thing I hadn't told anyone since I changed my name at 21. That when my father asked me to help him once, "Just sign here, kiddo," a formality, I had signed. It was a customer referral. It tied me to his club in a way that still made my stomach feel like the lake in February. It wasn't a crime, exactly. It was a breath away. I thought telling the truth might set it down. I didn't know yet that someone in that room was still selling. Who do you trust in a room where confession is profitable? Session 3 started with hot tea and sympathy. Arden had replaced the lemon cleaner with something that smelled like eucalyptus, which made the room feel like a spa pretending to be a lab. She said Jamie had withdrawn for personal reasons, and that we should remember why we came. The world outside this room runs on transactions, she said, steady. But inside, we run on reciprocity. It was my turn to confess. The timer showed 12 for each of us. The pen felt heavy. I wrote, "When I was 19, I signed a form for my father that helped him defraud people." Then I crossed out defraud and wrote hurt, because I couldn't swallow the first word with strangers watching. I read it out loud. The paper rasped against my thumb. The room hummed. Omar gave a low whistle that was more sympathy than judgment. Min's eyes softened behind glasses that had slid down her nose. Brooke reached for my hand across the table and squeezed once, light, like you do when words teeter. I said, "I thought it was a referral. I thought I was being a good daughter." My mouth tasted like pennies. I didn't get in trouble. He did, but I kept the pen he handed me. That's how it feels. Arden nodded the way therapists nod in movies. "Thank you, Rowan," she said. "Secrets lose their teeth when you name them." For the trust exercise, we drew cards. Mine said, "Unlock your phone and hand it to the person you trust most in this room for 2 minutes." The pot, $3,600, would grow to $5,000 if we all complied. If anyone declined, it would drop by half. I looked down at my screen. My heart did that seagull thing. Swoop, screech, land. I chose Min. She had the gravitas of someone who would label her tabs. She took my phone like a librarian takes a rare book and put it screen down on the table until Arden started the timer. Across from me, Theo made a small theatrical show of handing his phone to Brooke, who laughed and called him chaos in a voice that would have flirted with a potted plant. Heather passed hers to Omar and warned him about the embarrassing photo of her dog dressed as a taco. We were fine. We were performing trust, which sometimes counts. At minute 1, the door opened. A man in a blue jacket slipped in, whispered to Arden, and left as quietly as he came. Arden's face didn't move, which made mine want to. She said, "We're going to pause the timer. There's been an external inquiry." She aimed her calm at us like a soft light. No cause for alarm. My phone buzzed in Min's hand. Her eyes flicked to the screen. She looked at me with permission, and then at Arden for permission about my permission. Arden said, "If it's urgent, answer." The room felt like a hallway. It was my mother. Min held the phone out to me, and I stepped into the corner, aware of the way everyone pretended not to listen. My mother's voice was a whisper in a public library. "Rowan," she said, "someone called my office. A man. He asked if he knew you were participating in a confession club. He said he had a transcript of something you said." The world tilted like a train taking a curve too wide. "What did he say?" "He said you admitted to helping your father," she said, every word weighed. "He said it would be a shame if your future employers saw that." I closed my eyes. The eucalyptus smell turned chemical. "Mom," I said, "don't talk to anyone else today, please. If they call, hang up." I wanted to ask if she believed me. I wanted to ask how much she hated the part of me that never learned to pick safe rooms. Instead, I said, "I'll call you after." I handed the phone back to Min, who cradled it like something fragile in a museum case. Arden watched me and knew. She said, "We need a break." In the hallway, the hum from behind the mirror sounded louder, like a refrigerator working too hard. I pressed my palm against the painted-shut window and felt only cold. My mind did math I couldn't afford. The price of silence, the cost of being named. Brooke stepped close enough for me to smell her perfume, something clean and expensive, and said, low, "People are monsters on the internet. I can help you clean it up." She said help like a brand. Back at the table, Arden stacked our notebooks, her silver watch glinting in the fluorescent root. She said, "We will investigate the breach. Nothing leaves this room without my consent." But something already had, wearing my name like a borrowed coat. What do you do when the experiment you signed up for starts running in the wild? That night, I lay awake with the bakery's dawn rising through my floorboards and read the comment thread under a new post titled "The Honesty Hustle." Someone had uploaded a blurry photo of our building. The caption read, "Secret Confession Club in South Loop. Fake study, real cash. Your neighbors are selling their souls." In the comments, a user named Civic Watcher wrote, "Sources say one participant admitted to aiding wire fraud." I put my phone down like it stung and rinsed my mouth to get the copper taste out. I texted Arden. She responded at 1:07 a.m. "We're on it. Don't engage online." Then, trust me. The irony made me laugh once, sharp, like breaking something on purpose. The next session, Jamie's chair stayed empty, and a legal pad replaced it with a pen laid diagonal like a placeholder in a church view. Arden opened with a speech. "Someone is violating your trust. If you continue, you consent to that risk. If you withdraw, you'll still receive a partial stipend." The word stipend made the room feel like a classroom again. I pictured my rent and said I'd stay. We all said we'd stay. Part stubborn, part greed, part the human urge to finish what we start, even if what we start is a fire. After confessions, Theo admitted to lying on a loan application, Heather to hiding a parking ticket for 3 months and letting her girlfriend take the blame, Min to falsifying a data point once, small, which hurt her to say more than it hurt us to hear. The trust exercise was simple. Write a rumor you've heard about someone in the group. Pass it to Arden. She would read them aloud, without names. The pot would grow if we didn't flinch. I wrote, "Brooke is building a brand on other people's stories," and immediately hated myself for having an opinion dressed as moral insight. Omar wrote long and scratched out half. Theo wrote quickly and smirked like performing conflict was cardio. When Arden read them, the room changed temperature. Someone is sleeping with someone else here. The leak came from a woman with perfect hair. Brooke's mouth went into a hard smile. Rowan isn't who she says she is. That one hit me like the first step on black ice. I felt my face move as I tried to keep it still. Arden's eyes cut to mine and away. She read the rest. Some petty, some sharp enough to shave a person a new silhouette. When the timer chimed, it sounded like a smoke detector. On the way out, Omar caught my arm gently. "Hey," he said. The hallway smelled like eucalyptus again, sticky sweet. "That rumor? Ignore it. I Googled Civic Watcher. It's a burner account that's been dogging city programs for years. Always some expose. Could be any of us. Could be Arden." "Arden?" I whispered. "Look, the money, the attention, the mirror." He tilted his head toward the glass. "Who gets paid if this blows up? Who publishes the paper with our mess on it?" I wanted him to be wrong. I also wanted him to keep talking because fear makes even bad theories taste like certainty. We made a pact in the elevator. If anything else leaked, we'd tell each other first, not Arden. It was childish. It was also the only power we had. 2 days later, my museum manager called me into my office, which smells like dust and almonds. She closed the door like a person closing a chapter. "Rowan," she said, "I got an email from a citizen journalist. They asked if we vet employees for ethical alignment because one of our associates participates in a secret club monetizing confessions." She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "I don't need to know if that's true. I need to know if I can rely on you to keep this place out of it." "Yes," I said, truthfully. "You can rely on me." After my shift, Omar texted a photo of a note he found tucked under his windshield wiper. "Trust is a currency. Spend wisely." Theo sent a screenshot of a DM offering him 5 figures for a behind the mirror interview. Brooke posted a close-up of her coffee with the caption, "Some people can't handle steam." She didn't tag anyone, but hashtags can point without pointing. That evening, My mother came to my apartment with a Tupperware of lemon bars and the look she gets when she decides to say something delicate. We sat on my futon while the radiator hissed like a cat with opinions. She said, I read the forum. The lemon bars tasted like childhood and talk. She said, you are not your father, as if reading cue cards to the audience. You are not what people say when they don't know where to put their fear. I signed a form. Once. She said, you were a child. And tired slid into her voice like fog. I married a man who could make words sound like facts, even when they were wishes. And I let you believe him because I wanted to. That's on me. We didn't talk about the club. She didn't ask to come. The lemon bars left a sugar film on my teeth that made water taste metallic. After she left, I opened the notebook and wrote, the truth has a smell. Lemon, eucalyptus, ink, and something under all of it. Ozone, like a storm rehearsing. At session 5, the pot sat at $5,900 and felt like money on a table in a movie where everyone draws guns. Arden said we were nearly done. She said, after tonight, we vote on distribution. Trust will be rewarded. Her civil watch flashed. The timer blinked. The trust exercise. Pair up. Exchange your notebooks. Choose one page that you believe must never be read out loud. Read it anyway. The pot would double if we all complied. My mouth flooded with the taste of pennies again. I paired with Omar because he had gentleness like a profession. He slipped me his notebook open to a page with a stick-figure drawing of a car and the word accident written 5 times as if spelling could undo it. I slid him mine, turned to a page with a list of numbers. The accounts I had paid off over 10 years. Tuition, hospital, card, and a single name. Feldman. The FBI agent whose voice still visits my dreams and asked me to spell my last name slowly. Are you sure? He asked. No, I said. We read. The pot doubled to $11,800. And the next morning, the forum posted a photo of my notebook page. The name Feldman circled in red. Omar texted, I didn't do it. I believed him, which left. When the room is full of suspects, how do you pick one you can live with later? I went to Arden first because I wanted to believe in the person who told us to name the cloud formations. She sat in her office, separate from the conference room, smaller, with a plant that had learned to win, and listened with her hands tented. The air smelled like eucalyptus still, but beneath it, coffee gone sour. Someone photographed my page, I said, putting the printout on her desk. Only 2 people had my notebook, me and Omar. I don't think it was him. She didn't flinch. We lock the notebooks between sessions, she said. Only my team has access. Your team? She folded one hand over the other. Rowan, this is not a hobby. It's a funded study. There are assistants, analysts. We anonymize everything, but... She gave a small, clinical sigh. An employee went off protocol. He has been terminated. Who? I can't tell you. I left the building with the sense that the sidewalk could tilt if it wanted. Snow had become slush, and the city smelled like wet wool and exhaust. On the train, I watched a man practice a speech to his reflection. I practiced one too. I called Omar. We met at a diner in Little Italy that served pancakes all day and coffee that recognized its limitations. We slid into a booth that squeaked our names and spoke in half sentences like spies who'd forgotten their code. It could be Brooke, he said, stirring his mug like it had secrets. She wants followers. Followers crave mess. It could be Theo, I said. He likes chaos. It could be Arden. Press feeds grants. It could be me, I said, because I tried to aim the knife at my own feet first to see if it bounces. He looked at me with a kindness I didn't expect on a Tuesday. You're not doing this to people. You're doing this with people. It's different. We decided to test the room. The next session, we'd each write a fake tell, a decoy, and see what leaked. It was childish. It was also science, if you squint. Session 6 began with Arden's watch flashing like it sensed a storm. The trust exercise was the final one. Assign each participant a percentage of the pot. Justify your numbers out loud. The pot sat at $11,800, like a center of gravity. Arden said, "This is not just about money, it's about what trust is worth." Before voting, we passed our notebooks down the line as usual to write our confessions. I wrote a decoy. I once changed my name to hide from debt collectors. That part was true. Then I added, I still talk to my father every week. That part was a lie. I haven't spoken to him in 6 years because sometimes forgiveness is a door you shut to save the people inside. We voted. No one gave themselves less than 10%. A few gave themselves 40% and justified it as emotional labor. I gave most of my share to Min because she had told the truth the way brave people do it, plain with the edges left on. Arden collected the slips and said we'd hear results by email after her team reconciled anomalies, like we were a ledger, which we were. The next morning, a forum post appeared, "Daughter of convicted fraudster reconnects with dad." It included a red-circled quote from a source close to the study and a blurry photo of me leaving the building. The account posting it? Civic Watcher again, but a check of the metadata, a trick Omar taught me, showed the image had been uploaded from a device on our building's Wi-Fi network. Not Brooke, not Theo, not Min, not Omar. The building. I went back to Arden's office with the printout and the anger I had been delaying. "You said the employee was terminated." "He was," she said. "Yesterday." "The leak was posted this morning," I said. She looked at the photo long enough for me to watch her decide something. "Rowan, you need to leave this alone." The second hand of her watch clicked. Somewhere down the hall, paper fed into a copier with that dry mouth sound machines make when they've been asked to do too much. Her voice dropped a fraction. She said, "This is real research. If you blow it up, you will hurt more than a grant. You'll hurt data that might help people. There are people in your data." She didn't disagree. She also didn't stand up. I left, but not alone. As the elevator doors slid shut, I caught a reflection behind me in the metal. A man in a blue jacket. I had seen him the day the timer paused. He looked away like he'd been caught looking at a painting and pretending he understood it. Later that afternoon, Omar sent me a screenshot. City Council's subcommittee to hold hearing on trust economies. The chair? A man named Councilman Arden. The last name tasted familiar before my brain offered the context. Dr. Arden's husband. What happens when the person you trusted to measure the storm owns the weather? I started counting doors. It's what I do when I'm afraid. I map exits like I'm memorizing poetry. The building had 2 stairwells and 1 freight elevator that smelled like old cardboard. The conference room had 4 chairs you could use as wedges if you had to. Arden's office had 1 window that opened exactly 3 inches, which is enough to hear the street, but not enough to matter. I met Omar and Min at a park near IUC where the ducks in the pond looked like executives. We brought coffee and a plan made of taped together common sense. Step 1, confirm the Arden connection. Omar found a wedding announcement from 10 years ago. Sociologist marries public servant, with a photo of a younger Dr. Arden in the same silver watch. Step 2, find motive. Min, methodical, made a list in her neat print. Grants, publicity, policy influence, consulting fees. Step 3, follow the leaks to an endpoint we could name. We needed a key. We found it in the form of Theo, who texted the group chat a photo of his new haircut and the caption, "If the city's gonna drag me, at least I look good." Theo likes attention, like plants like sun. You can't blame him for it. I asked him to meet me for a touch-up at his shop so I could talk content strategy. He grinned like I'd offered him electricity. In his chair, with the buzz of clippers and the smell of talc, I asked about the DM offering him 5 figures for an interview. "Ghosted," he said, too breezy. "Unless they double it." He spun me half around and said in the mirror, "You know Brooke has a side deal, right? She's selling a series called The Trust Diet. She's been recording voice notes after sessions, calls them debriefs, says it's pattern journaling. I call it monetizing vibes." There, a seam. Min and I set a trap. We created a fake burner account and messaged Brooke as a podcaster, offering an advance for an exclusive on trust economies. We baited the hook with words like Audible Original and brand synergy. She bit. She suggested we meet at a wine bar in the West Loop that smells like oak and possibility. We went in with the recorder in my tote and a promise to ourselves not to do anything illegal. The line is fuzzy in rooms with dim lighting. Brooke wore confidence like a trench coat. She sipped a $16 Sauvignon Blanc and talked about narrative arcs. When I asked how she'd handled competing leaks, she blinked that slow, practiced blink influencers use when they're thinking of a way to pretend a question was theirs all along. Leaks keep engagement high, but you can't depend on them. You have to own your story. She flipped her hair. And ask for help from people who know the lanes. "Like who?" asked Min, all innocence. "Like the councilman's office," she said, and then paused like she'd tripped. "I mean, policy-wise, it's good to be on the radar." Her phone lit on the table with a text, ARDEN. Call when free. She flipped the phone face down with a smile that would break glass. We had our link. We didn't have proof. Proof came from Heather, who texted me at midnight, "I think I found something." She had a friend in IT who owed her favors. She asked him to look up the IP addresses attached to a certain Gmail account, Civic Watcher, from a set of dates. He found logins from a municipal network and from a server block that matched a consultancy housed in the same building as our study. The registrant on that consultancy, Arden Associates LLC. I didn't sleep. The bakery started at 4 a.m., and I lay there smelling bread and wondering how long truth can sit before it goes stale. The next day, I printed everything and put it in a manila folder like a TV character. Omar and I walked it to a reporter he knew from a fair who took his card at 2 a.m. and actually called back. Her name was Tasha. She wore sneakers with her suit and listened like someone waiting for a keyword to drop from the ceiling. We gave her the folder, and she said, "If we run this, it'll get ugly." We said, "It's already ugly." At session 7, yes, there was a 7, Arden had added a bonus wrap-up to restore cohesion. The room felt like a stage after a lighting change. She smiled with her whole face, but not her eyes. We've had challenges. We've also done something extraordinary. The city is watching. The trust exercise was a final cruelty. Choose one person you would trust with your life. Stand behind them. Money didn't factor. The pot had been frozen pending distribution verification. We moved like pieces. Heather stood behind Omar, Omar behind Min, Min behind me, Theo behind Brooke, Brooke behind Arden, because of course she did. I expected 2 people behind me at most. When I felt 3, I almost turned to count. I didn't. I stared at Arden and felt my face learn a new expression, the one you wear when you realized you've been a data point and also bait. Arden said something about community. The mirror hummed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Tasha, running at 6. Lawyered. Brace. We didn't make it to 6. At 4:15, a city inspector in a gray suit and the expression of a person who does not enjoy surprises walked in with a warrant. Arden's face finally moved. The watch on her wrist looked suddenly ridiculous, an accessory pretending to be time. The inspector said, "We've received credible reports of unapproved data collection and conflicts of interest." He aimed his calm like a beam at the mirror. "Turn that off." I should have felt vindicated. I felt sick. The room smelled like eucalyptus and fear. Arden looked at me and knew exactly who had brought the weather. "You don't understand what you've done," she said quietly. "Maybe not, but I understand what you did." The inspector's team took the notebooks. The pot sat on a spreadsheet somewhere, now a number in a legal file. We stood there, 8 strangers in a room that promised to teach us about trust and delivered a live demo of how to break it. When the system that measured honesty collapses, what do you salvage first? Your name, your money, or your nerve?
The choice wasn't cinematic. No rain on glass, no dramatic underscoring. It was an email from a lawyer, Arden Associates Counsel, offering an NDA and a payout if I agreed to clarify my statements and avoid defamatory implications. The amount matched 2 months' rent and the repair on my mother's car and the cost of a plane ticket to anywhere warmer than March in Chicago. It also tasted like my father's pen. I wrote to Tasha. They offered hush money. She wrote back, "Of course they did." Then, "You don't owe anyone a crusade. Choose safety if you need to." I loved her for that. Omar said, "Take it if it keeps you safe." Min said, "Don't take it if it keeps them safe." My mother said, "I will love you either way." I made tea and let it go cold twice. The bakery downstairs pulled bread from the oven, and the smell climbed my stairs with an argument. Live small and warm, or step into weather and freeze for a while. I wrote back, "No NDA." Then I closed my laptop and shook like I'd run. In the quiet afterward, I listened to the radiator breathe and counted doors. My choice felt like the opposite of my father's. Maybe that's a childish way to decide. Maybe it's the only one that mattered to me. The next morning, Brooke posted a video titled, "Why I Left the Trust Club." She cried elegantly and said phrases like weaponized narrative and jealous haters and protect your peace. Comments split along predictable lines. Theo posted scissors emojis. Heather texted a photo of her dog in a sweater that said "trust fall," and I laughed until my stomach hurt. Arden's team sent a second email, colder. The subject line, "Notice of Potential Litigation." It used phrases my father taught me to fear: tortious interference, reputational harm, injunctive relief. I forwarded it to Tasha and waited for my heart to re-enter my body. She replied, "We'll cover you." Then, "Breathe." I did. It sounded like a new word. When you refuse the easy settlement, can you live with the harder weather you summoned? The unraveling began with the city council hearing. It was held in a chamber that looks grand on TV and cramped in person, the air smelling like polished wood and microphones. Councilman Ardent recused himself to avoid the appearance of impropriety, which made people behind me snort softly. Dr. Ardent sat 3 rows up,
silver watch catching the light. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her, which is its own kind of looking. Tasha's story had hit the morning news. Study on trust tied to political office, leaks, and monetized confessions. She included our documents, redacted enough to keep us safe, detailed enough to point. The comments on the paper's website were a mess, but the official faces in the chamber were tidy. A deputy inspector read a list of concerns, including unapproved audio collection from the Mirror and payments routed through a consultancy that shared a tax ID with the councilman's campaign committee. And then came the second twist, which made my ribs ring. A woman in a navy blazer approached the mic with a stack of binders like textbooks. She introduced herself as Dr. Sloan, a social psychologist from Northwestern. She'd been working on a replication of Arden's earlier research and happened to audit data streams when our story broke. I found a set of hidden variables in the study's algorithm, she said, voice steady like a metronome. The payout model didn't just reward honesty, it punished dissent. She clicked a slide. The numbers glowed on a screen like a confession. Participants who questioned the methodology saw smaller shares independent of group vote. In small print, a line read, "Behavioral adjustment factor." Arden's face flushed for the first time. She whispered to her lawyer. I felt every cell in my body stand up, like strangers at the same surprise party. The formula had built me a smaller person because I had asked about the mirror, because I had paused too long before saying yes. It wasn't just leaks. It was math turned into a leash. After the hearing, the hallway smelled like paper and indignation. Reporters asked me for comment. I said, "We were told to trust the study." That line made the evening broadcast because it sounded good over B-roll of the mirror being carried out like a patient. At home, my mother brought soup and asked if we could watch something stupid while the city had opinions. We chose a nature documentary narrated by a man with a voice like rain. I thought about the adjustment factor while seals slid into the ocean. I thought about how small tweaks make systems sing the tunes their owners want. My father called it skim. Ardent called it modeling. The effect is the same. The pot never behaves like you think it should. The next morning, an envelope slid under my door. Inside, a single sheet torn from a notebook, perforations still fuzzy. In blue pen, trust is leverage. A. No address, no threat, just a reminder that letters can be knives. I took it to Morales, not our detective from another story, but an officer assigned to the council's ethics unit who had been looped in by Tasha. He looked at the note and said, "File it." His office smelled like a copier's warm breath. He asked if I felt safe. I said yes, because fear makes me polite. Days turned into a stretch of headlines and hearings. The study shut down pending review. Payments to participants froze in an escrow that felt like a museum display behind glass. Money, theoretically yours, practically not. Ardent resigned to focus on family. Councilman Ardent held a press conference where he used the word integrity 4 times and mistakes were made twice, without naming a subject. Brooke pivoted to a new series called Unfollow. Theo posted haircuts with captions like, "Scissors don't lie." Heather went back to nights with cartoon owl scrubs. Omar applied to med school again. One evening, Min and I walked along the river. The water moved brown and certain. She said, "Do you know what bothers me most?" I braced for something about math. She surprised me. That they used our honesty to build their lie. We stood there with hot hands and cold coats while the city did its winter dusk thing, blue deepening like a bruise, and I felt something unclench. Maybe it was about money, maybe it was about my father, maybe it was about the notebook page with perforations still visible. I wrote to the museum's board about hosting a panel on ethics of storytelling and trust economies. They said yes because museums like to be useful in the aftermath. I asked Tasha, Dr. Sloan, and a public defender to sit with me at a table that smelt like polish and let strangers ask questions that were really confessions. How do I tell the truth when I can't control what someone does with it? How do I forgive myself for believing? How much is a secret worth? No one mentioned the pot. Maybe that was the lesson. Or maybe all of us were too tired to count. The study's lawyer sent another letter gently threatening litigation. Tasha's paper sent another lawyer saying, try it. I started sleeping through the bakery's 4 a.m. batch again. Omar texted a photo of his med school acceptance with third time's a charm, and I cried on the train, which is allowed here if you face the window. The last unresolved thing was the money. An email arrived with subject distribution, and a PDF with percentages, and a number that felt like a consolation prize for a game I had not known the rules to. I could have fought it. I didn't. I split it with men and sent a portion anonymously to a fund Dr. Sloan runs for harmed research subjects. It felt like putting a coin in a jar labeled, "Some future person won't have to do this." A week after the envelope, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A man's, older, rasped by cigarettes and regret. My father. "Kiddo," he said. "I saw the news. Be careful who holds your secrets." Then the smallest pause. "I'm proud you didn't sell yours." The line clicked. I sat on the floor by my door back against the wood and let the radiator talk to me until the cold left my hands. If the second twist is that power can price your honesty, the final one is that you don't have to sell. But can you stand not to when the rent is due?
The panel at the museum sold out, which, in our world, means 50 chairs full and a line for cookies. The air smelled like coffee and school glue. I opened with the confession that wasn't new to me anymore, that I signed a form once and spent 10 years trying to unsign it with 1,000 small decisions. The audience leaned in, the way people lean when they see a little of themselves. Tasha talked about consent in context, about how journalism can be a blade or a bridge. Dr. Sloan walked us through the adjustment factor with a marker on a squeaky whiteboard and managed to make math feel like a moral language. The public defender explained coercive contracts, how NDAs get people to drown quietly. Someone in the third row asked, "How do we build trust that doesn't need surveillance?" And the room went very still, as if waiting for an answer someone had packed in a pocket. I said, "Maybe we start by refusing payment for the parts of ourselves that can't be priced." It sounded neat. Life is rarely neat. But the nods felt like a kind of agreement we could live with. After the Q&A, while people trickled toward the cookies and the bathrooms, a woman approached with a notebook held like a talisman. She was older than me, by a decade, maybe two. "I was in a research study once," she said. "They paid us cash in envelopes. I kept the envelope and the money and burned the consent form." She laughed, eyes shining. "It felt good. It felt bad. I don't know." "I do," I said. "It felt like being the one who gets to choose the ending." When the room was almost empty, Dr. Arden stood in the doorway. No watch, no entourage, just a black coat and a face that had learned something about weather. For a second, my body did what it had trained to do. Footsteps in hallways, cameras and mirrors, numbers and margins. Then my brain caught up. She walked closer until we had to admit we were in the same conversation. She said, "You were a good subject." It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't not.
I'm a person, I said. She nodded. Small. The adjustment factor wasn't mine. It came from the fundin'. We refined it. It got baked in. She looked down at her hands. I stopped noticing when I agreed. That's not a defense, I said, but softer than I expected. No, it's a map. She met my eyes. Use it. She left. The museum lights hummed the way public buildings hum after hours. I imagined a line drawing connecting our foreheads, a graph nobody asked to be plotted on. I went to the staff room and washed mugs that didn't need washing, just to let the hot water do what it's good at. The soap smelled like lemons. I didn't flinch. On my walk home, a bus rattled by like a sentence too long, and the city did its regular trick of looking brand new and very old in the same breath. I passed our old building in the South Loop and looked up at the window we used to sit behind explaining honesty to each other. It stared back like any blank eye. A text pinged. Omar. First day of orientation. The cadavers don't judge. Another. Min. Submitted an ethics proposal. Participant veto power on publication. Another. Heather. Dog ate a pen. ER says he's fine. Scrubs ruined. Theo posted a haircut with the caption, "The only thing sharper than these fades is knowing when to walk away." Brooklyn followed me, which felt like a public holiday in a small nation. When I got home, the bakery smelled like sugar, cinnamon, and the kind of heat that makes winter bearable. My mother texted a photo of a sunset from a bus window and wrote, "Look up." I did. The sky over Pilsen was the color of bruised peaches, and for the first time in months, the future didn't look like a ledger. It looked like a page I could write on without anyone adjusting the margins. If the climax of a story about trust is simply choosing it without witnesses, did it still happen? I think yes. My heart was there to take attendance. Spring came like an apology. The river thawed, and people pretended not to be surprised by warmth. The study dissolved. The council introduced a bill requiring independent oversight for research that collects personal narratives. It wasn't perfect. It was a page. I started a small group at the museum on Tuesday nights, the Club of Anonymous Secrets, which sounds like a joke until you sit down and watch strangers be brave. No mirror, no pot, no watch. We keep our phones and the windows open if we want. The one rule: what you say here is yours. We are witnesses, not distributors. The smell is coffee and sometimes lilacs from a bouquet someone brings. We put a jar by the door for donations to a domestic violence shelter and a community legal clinic. The jar fills slowly and consistently, which feels like an argument for goodness. Sometimes I see Dr. Sloan in the audience, listening like the math could still surprise her. Sometimes Omar brings flashcards and reviews cranial nerves between stories. Min shows up with pencils and timelines and patience. Heather comes on nights she's not at the hospital. Theo offered to cut hair in the lobby for tips to the jar. Brooke never came. She didn't need to. My father sent a letter with no return address. Inside, a page torn from a black notebook, and a sentence. Try not to make the story pay you back. Make it pay forward. I didn't write back. I left the page on my desk until it became less a message and more an object, which is my favorite kind of alchemy. I walk past the South Loop building sometimes. The glaze of scandal has rubbed off in the way cities abrade. Someone else rents the office. The mirror is gone. The paint is the same. If I press my hand to the window, the glass is just glass. I still check doors. I still count exits. But I also open more windows. On Sundays, my mother and I sit by the lake with paper cups of coffee and talk about everything, including money, including my father. She says the word fraud now without flinching. I say trust and mean it without tasting copper. The bakery downstairs added cinnamon rolls the size of fists. I split one with Tasha after a panel and we laughed about nothing until it became something. Life is smaller than the headlines and bigger than the comments. Mostly it's coffee that goes cold and friends who text dog photos and choosing not to sell the parts of yourself that make the rest of you possible. Maybe that's all a resolution is, deciding who gets to hold the pen when you sign your name to your own life.
Here's what the study taught me, which is not what it meant to teach. Secrets are an economy only if you agree to the exchange. You can choose not to price your interior. You can choose to measure success in softer units: sleep, laughter, a room where the windows open. Trust isn't a leap into someone's arms. It's a series of small, mundane choices. Who you hand your phone to, which rumor you ignore, what door you prop open. It's letting your mother love you without earning it, and letting yourself ask for a lawyer when a letter uses words like injunctive relief. In honesty, it's not a currency, it's a compass. It won't pay your rent, but it will make sure that when the rent is due, the person who counts the bills is someone you can live with later. My father tried to teach me to let numbers tell the story. Dr. Arden tried to teach me to let the model decide. I'm learning to let my life do it, in sentences that I would sign under oath. When people come to the Club of Anonymous Secrets and ask if we really keep things private, I say, we keep them yours. I watch the way their shoulders drop at that. Sometimes the drop is the whole reason they came. The world will always have mirrors. The work is choosing not to stand in front of the ones that distort you on purpose.
I don't know if I'll ever stop counting doors, but now I count the people who'd hold one for me, too. In a city built on steel and weather, I found a way to be soft without being stolen.